With its cloud-native core technology platform, Socotra enables carriers to easily and efficiently manage complex interactions throughout the life cycle of policies. In this session, they will share their perspective on embedded insurance, a powerful trend with the potential to change the industry. Learn about the 5 important success factors to be successful in embedded insurance. Please welcome Socotra.
Welcome to our session. I have a cheat sheet here, so if I'm looking down, I'm looking at my cheat sheet. We're going to talk about embedded insurance. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Seb Chakraborty. My name is Akine Akwibo. I'm the Chief Business Officer for Socotra. And before we get started, we have 5 tips we're going to talk about. Seb, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us about your role at D&G, and for those that are not familiar, what does Domestic in General do?
My name is Seb Chakraborty. I am the Product and Technology Director of Domestic in General, which is a company which has been around for about 100 years. It is in the space of extended warranty. When I say that, I mean the warranty that you get, which is on the back of your manufacturer's warranty for appliances like washing machines, dishwashers. We're in 12 countries, principally in the UK, and yeah, that's Domestic in General.
Okay, so a little bit about you before we move on. Why do you love what you do?
Well, so I look after product and I look after technology, and that means that I have the ability to shape the transformation of an entire business, and I feel very privileged in that. So for me, that means that I can get to understand the challenges for the business, also spot the trends, and then also have the ability to shape and deliver those and execute on those, being responsible for technology.
Okay, and then technology and insurance. What gets you excited about those 2 things?
I think the fact that technology can shape an entire business is quite profound, and that technology moves so very fast, and being able to take advantage of the tech that has sprung up in the world. And the previous presentation was about ChatGPT. It moves really fast, it's very exciting, and you can use that to respond to customer needs, which is what gets me out of bed in the mornings.
Okay, great. Let's move on to embedded insurance. So I'm going to read some stats. I think we've talked about embedded insurance at the conference here. There was a whole workshop yesterday about embedded insurance. But like you said, Domestic in General has been doing this for 100 years. So here are some stats. Simon Torrance writes that there's a $3 trillion with a T US dollars market opportunity in embedded insurance. And obviously it will help close the protection gap and so on. Swiss Re predicts that embedded insurance is the only channel that will double by the year 2030. Those are some pretty big numbers, about the space. And so we have high expectations. So for the benefit of this discussion, maybe we should define what embedded insurance is to you. I was going to read what ChatGPT's response was to that, but it's very long, and so I don't want to read it here. But how do you define embedded insurance?
So I think at a high level, what embedded insurance is taking an insurance product or service and integrating that into another non-insurance journey. So an unintegrated, embedded insurance product would be me booking a flight to Malaga, but not having the travel insurance part included in that same journey. For Domestic in General, that would be akin to buying a washing machine and not being given the opportunity of buying the extended warranty within that same journey. So when I think about insurance in general, it's a safety net. You only need it when you need it. And if you're not building that into a frictionless journey, then what you're doing is you're denying, or probably you're creating a cognitive step which is unnecessary, in that you may forget to buy the insurance once you've left the initial journey. And that therefore causes a specific customer risk in that you do not give that customer the value. They may miss out on the insurance opportunity which would cover them. And also there's a revenue opportunity for an insurer or a partner as a revenue stream. But interestingly, what I think we're talking about when we talk about embedded insurance is an integrated customer experience. And if I said to a product person, what is, do you think so a product person would always be thinking, how do I make my customer journey, even when it's a standalone product journey, how do I make it more interesting? How do I make it more relevant? How do I make it more customer-centric? How do I make it more intuitive? How do I make it more data-driven? And so I think that the embedded piece is really about customer experience, and yet it's possibly a relevant term, because ultimately, in order to get embedded insurance working, you need people involved, you need partners involved, you need customers involved, and in order for them to work together as a partner, there's something in there for them. So maybe the term embedded insurance is actually appropriate. Now, what I think is really interesting is I think the term's been around for a really long time, and Domestic in General has been doing some form of embedded insurance for decades, and we build it into our registration journeys. And I think actually the one aspect of it is, I think that one might be thinking of embedded plus plus, so that as you integrate more and more, it becomes, I guess, more relevant and more interesting and more exciting for customers because it's removing that friction.
So that ties directly to my next question. Before we get into the tips, I promise they're coming. So, the last few years, we've been talking about embedded insurance. We're both sort of technically inclined. We like to talk about tech. So what has changed in the last couple of years technologically that this seems like such a hot topic right now? And maybe you can speak to it from a D&G perspective, but also just in general.
Well, I think it's totally clear that the API economy has shifted the game, that companies that, like the ride-sharing companies like Uber, would not exist without an API economy, the ability to have context, location data, integration into payment platforms. And so I think that as more and more companies join the API economy, the more and more friction will be removed, the easier it will be for partners to get together, and this thing we're calling embedded insurance possible. From a Domestic in General perspective, I think that, as I mentioned before, the sort of safety net aspect where you only buy the insurance either within the journey or after the journey. Now, life has got more interesting also because the number of touch points has grown. So, even for our business, there are many touch points. You go into a high street store, you buy a washing machine, and hopefully there's a point of sale experience, but if it isn't in the store, it will be in your home when you're unboxing the product, or when you're on a website, or when you're calling the IVR. So there are all these different touch points. So when we talk again about integration or embedded, really what we're talking about is this sort of life cycle of events and channels that you have to think about. And again, when I think about Domestic in General, so we are one of the, so we have hundreds of partners, retail partners, OEM partners, and that means we look after many, many, many websites and thousands of journeys. So the level of integration and the level of embedding is also really very interesting and challenging, and it becomes harder to do when you have complexity in your organization.
I think you're reading my notes because I was going to go to my next question, but you kind of answered it. So let's go to tip number one. We wrote down find the right partner. That's easy to say. I was in a session yesterday, and a lot of folks talked about, business alignment, technology alignment, and so on and so forth, infrastructure alignment, in order to find this partner that you're going to embed an insurance product in, and so on and so forth. You just mentioned you've done this with hundreds of partners. How do you decide, how do you choose the right partner?
Again, I think firstly, it's about having the same objectives. Now, from an embedded perspective, you want to understand how they feel about the customer and the customer journey. So there is work to do when you bring partners together. If you're a standalone journey, there's less work to do. But when you want to align, you also have to have some shared goals. And that means having a view about how much integration you're willing to accept and how easy that will be. Because from a partner's perspective, they want it to be super easy. They want to, and this is where the new tech comes in, so that the more super easy it is for a partner to jump on board and become part of a joined up journey, the more willing they'll be to engage with you. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is the level of technical savviness that the partners have. So it's no good you being technically savvy or having a tech team who can respond. It's very important for the partner to also be able to integrate with you. And so again, back to the easy point, as long as you can make it super easy for them, they'll be willing to jump on board and work with you. Yeah.
Have you ever done business with a partner that was not technically savvy?
I think you're always going to come across partners who are less mature in their sophistication around tech. So again, with so many businesses out there, the level of maturity of their tech is going to vary. And I think that's something that if you're considering doing embedded insurance, then it will be an important assessment criteria for you.
Okay, so tip number two is focus on the customer. But again, common sense, if you will. The promise of embedded insurance, at least as I think about it, is sort of a seamless journey, to purchase whatever service or product that has this safety net attached to it. Can you describe how you do this at Domestic in General?
Yeah, I mean, so when you're thinking about the customer, there are some very basics. You have to help the customer make effective decisions about the product. You have to make the product meet the requirements of that product. You have to offer a aftercare service, and you have to have transparent pricing, and those things are kind of a must. But on top of that, one should be thinking about the data and how you use your data and make the experience as good as it can be. Data in the moment is very important. The more real-time you make that data, the more relevant it will be. And I think that, I think that's probably what I'd say.
So you talk about data, and actually that's tip number 3, leveraging or using data and analytics and so on and so forth. And the last talk was about ChatGPT and using data. There's a famous saying, let the data decide. How does Domestic in General use data for their customers? I think I heard the number of customers was something around 20 or 23 million, or at least 23 million plans or something like that. How do you use that data? Is too much data bad?
So Domestic in General isn't short of data. We have probably one of the largest data sets for appliances. And that means that we know the model, we know what happens when people claim, and we can use that data for our underwriting and for our pricing decisions, but also for how to help people during the claims process. And that's how we typically are using the data. And I think when I think of embedded, again, going back to embedded insurance, when I think about embedded insurance, I'm really thinking about integrated customer lifecycle view. And the data is used at every single touch point to inform us about how to help the customer, whether it's to help them to decide their propositions, help them to decide the best pricing, and it's super exciting to be sitting on or using the data that we have, also combining it with data in the data economy to help us do right things for the customer.
So you were mentioning to me, you started playing around with ChatGPT and so on. Can you talk a little bit about some of the early things you're thinking about, the use cases, the actual use cases you think would be helpful for your customers?
I think one core use case for us is the appliance data that we have and how we can make the claims process more straightforward. So when someone has an issue with their appliance, do they have a genuine issue where we need to send an engineer to their property, or do we have a real issue? And so one of the things we're looking at is how we can use all of the manuals that we've got and all the model numbers we have to see if that's supported by when a customer calls in, they can query that data to say, actually, these are the 10 top reasons that your appliance may be having an issue. Because obviously you want to help them as much as possible before you send an engineer to the property, because that's not a good experience either for the customer, or could be a wasted visit for the engineer. So I think that's a classic use case.
So tip number 4 is invest in modern technology. And obviously this is near and dear to my heart, not just because I work at Socotra, a modern core policy administration system born in the cloud. What does that mean to domestic in general in terms of investing in modern technology? I think we've touched on it, but as it applies to scale, customer success, customer experience, how do you think about technology? Second part of this question is, it's easy to say invest in modern technology, spend money. When you're a large insurer and you have a lot of legacy, it's actually not that easy to bring in new technology. So can you talk about those two things?
Yeah, so the first one was, how do I think about technology? Right, so given the pace with which technology moves and what I was talking about before about the API economy, we want to be part of that economy. It's super hard to deliver value for customers when you're reliant on technology which has been around a really long time. Now, to give you an idea of that, within domestic in general, we have technology which has been around for 40 years. And we recognize that there is one of the first things that we did was to set up a transformation program based on what a solid enterprise architecture would be to allow us to accelerate. So that's the key thing. How do we accelerate? And so we decided very quickly to within this enterprise architecture strategy, to base it on cloud, being API first, being data led, being able to use DevSecOps and accelerate the pipelines to allow value to be delivered quickly. And also part of that strategy was to use software as a service platforms like Socotra, because we know that while we've been doing some form of embedded insurance for a while, if you want to change the journey fast and change your propositions fast and be able to scale not only in the UK but other countries in the world, then you have to completely revise your technology stack, and therefore you do have to invest, which is what we chose to do. And we are seeing the value of so much of that already in terms of particularly the fact that we are now building all our cloud services in Amazon Web Services. That's the first part of your question.
Yep. And
what was the second part?
The second question was around basically like the challenges you face with doing, I guess, with leveraging technology because you have legacy systems, because you have to replace them. I talk to insurers all the time, and this is a problem because you can't just junk these systems.
No, I think that with a transformation, no transformation is easy. The best way to deal with the transformation is to do it in bite-sized pieces. And some of those legacy systems will be around a long time, and it's not an instant flick the switch and suddenly you're off your old platforms. So what we are doing, we realize that the meat of what we're trying to do is around integration. And what we very quickly did was move a lot of our integrations straight into AWS and started to build them as RESTful APIs. And we have built a culture within Domestic and General tech team of DevSecOps so that we can start to accelerate those pipelines, add immediate value, and then begin to take elements off our AS400 systems that can easily be ported to the cloud, and slowly we'll be eating the elephant. That's the technical approach that
and you do this, and the business people are not chasing you out of the room?
No, because we're constantly adding value from the fact that most of a lot of the juice that we're providing is around the speed of delivery. We've managed to increase and accelerate our speed of delivery. Okay,
so the last tip is test and learn, and I think this goes by very different sort of names. It's basically try something out. If you fail fast, and then try the next thing and the new thing. It's again one of those things that we talk about as tech folks, but it's actually not that easy to do in a large organization where you have an operational business, you have to run it, you have to answer to the business folks. How do you do test and learn in a large organization, especially as it applies to your business?
So we try to consider ourselves a learning organization, and we want to be flexible. So therefore, we do test and learn as much as we possibly can. Needs are always changing, and we've just seen over the last 3 years, we've had COVID, we've had supply chain shocks, we've had war in Ukraine, which has also caused the supply chain shocks, and now we've got the cost of living crisis. So we know we have to be flexible. So therefore, test and learning is like right up there in terms of what we consider as important. And we do that by having the sort of pipelines that allow us to deliver change fast, so that we can essentially do more continuous integration and more release on demand. That's one aspect. Another is to do small pilots to test that those things work before we then roll them out to a wider customer base. And we have a culture. I think a culture is incredibly important when you're talking about test and learn. We try to have a culture of innovation to get people to challenge themselves about why we should accept one thing or another. And the last thing I think we probably do is A/B test a lot of the journeys that we roll out to market.
So one of the, I think McKinsey wrote an article recently and said one of the threats, if you will, of embedded insurance is commoditization of insurance products, where it's no longer, it's a commodity. Maybe you compete on price or something else, and it's not focused on actual customer needs or individuals, if you will. Do you agree with this, or how do you think about sort of embedded insurance and commoditization?
I think that I can see why someone might say that, but I don't believe it. Right? So I think that insurance has to adapt because the market is constantly changing, and therefore insurers that focus on customer needs and focus on the right proposition, the right time for the right customer, and can deliver that, which is where the technology comes in, are the ones that are going to win in this space.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about 5 tips. Find the right partner, focus on the customer, invest in technology, test and learn, and leverage your data. What last piece of advice would you offer this group, based on your experience in technology, based on your experience of having done this sort of very successfully over the last decades? What would you leave as a key piece of advice?
I think I would say that to focus on the storytelling around embedded insurance, it's a statement which needs kind of unpacking, which I think I tried to do by explaining it as a customer experience thing. The more you can think of it as a story where there are actors involved, partners, there's a narrative involved, which is the journey, then I think and it's complicated, it's not straightforward. I think I would say that you've got embedded insurance, then you've got even deeper embedded, and that is just other levels on top of the customer experience. So I'd say focus it on it think of it as a story, tell the story, and that story is really about customer experience.
Well, thank you, Seb. Thank you for joining our session. I hope you've learned from Seb and Domestic in general, at least their view on embedded insurance, and we'll see you later.
Thank you, Kina.
Thank you.